One day, a year and a half ago or so, I had valet. I always am late for whatever thing we're doing at Little America. And I stopped for valet parking because I didn't want to be any later. And the valet who gave me my ticket was so polite and handsome, and I thought, he seems familiar, but didn't think anything of it. And when I got back out, he came to me and he said, "Did you used to live on 3rd Avenue? And I said, yeah. And he said, "Well, I'm James Moyle. My mom and dad were Jim and Janice up the street from you." And I said, "My goodness, James, how great to see you. And here you are as a valet." And he said, "Yeah, that's one of my jobs." A little while later, I saw him at Park Lane. He was the night manager. So this kid is holding down at least 2 jobs. This is his 3rd. And he said his story is quite remarkable. So he came up for a glass of juice in my living room, and we had a chat about what had happened with him and what happened afterward. And it is such an amazing story. I wanted you all to hear it. So there we have it, James Henry Moyle. I'm so grateful he came.
I'm grateful to be with you today.
You need to use your mic.
Yeah?
I'm sorry. Use it like a singer's mic.
Okay.
Just hold it.
I need my hands though, so.
Oh, you do? There you go, and put it in front of his mouth.
So rather than showing slides, I took pictures. Hi, Kathy. Oh my gosh. It's my first cousin. I haven't seen her for 3 decades. You're so beautiful.
Oh, you're so sweet.
You know, oh my
You're
gosh.
really handsome. It's nice to see you.
That's my daughter Mary right there.
Oh, hi.
Okay, enough with the family
Okay,
reunion.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry
Make
about
sure we
that.
can hear you, babe. That's what we want.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you can't hear him. When he-
Terrell, thanks for asking me to come. I've always looked up to you and I love you.
We are honored you came.
How cool is it to be in this historic building? I've known of the town club ever since I went to Wasatch Elementary, just a block away. It's the cool mansion that all of the Moyle women could go into and none of the Moyle men could go into. It's taken me 50 years to get into this place. Please meet my beautiful daughter Mary. We call her Mare in our family. Mary will participate with me at the end and will answer any questions you have. These are pictures of that little lamb right there. And I'll pass them around. Many of you knew Sue Scott, my wonderful aunt. I'm representing with the Scott Machinery hat.
Oh, I love it.
And her daughters, Kathy and Mel, are here today. Sue's nieces, my first cousins Dorian and Adrian, are also here. And this is a reunion I just had with them a few days ago. Many other women from my family have been here, including my former wife. Our family has great heritage here in Salt Lake. Our great-great-great-grandparents, John and Philippa Moyle, converted in England and pioneered diligently to get here. John and Philippa Moyle and their son James, who inspired Jameses in every generation since, all the way to my son James, were great people. John and Philippa were asked by Brigham Young to settle Alpine. One day, John was helping Philippa milk a cow and was kicked badly in the leg and had a compound fracture. The break was so bad that they had to strap him to a door and cut off his leg with a bucksaw. Philippa helped fashion a crude prosthetic leg. Eventually, he walked back and forth from Alpine to the Salt Lake Temple, where he was the head stonemason. He walked back and forth the 44 miles round trip every week for decades, painfully. His son James always knew where his father was because he could hear the wood stump clomping around on the scaffolding high on the temple walls. I believe Philippa was even tougher than John, keeping the ranch going during the work week. John and James built a stone fort that Felipa could take the rest of the family into to defend themselves from unhappy Native Americans that were here first. Today, that stone fort and house are part of Moyle Park, still in Alpine. A movie about their lives called Only a Stonecutter honors their life's work. My great-grandmother, Alice Dinwiddie, was an influential matriarch. She met her husband after he graduated from law school at the University of Michigan. James Henry Moyle had graduated from the University of Deseret, that, as you know, is the University of Utah today. When James arrived in Ann Arbor, they told him it would take him 5 years to get his law degree and be even tougher because he was a Mormon. With pioneer grit, James graduated in 2.5 years and was president of his law school. Alice gave birth to 9 children, and James built a law practice. James and Alice worked hard raising their family and, like many in the day, overcame many challenges. Years later, James and Alice's home phone rang. It was the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who asked them to come to Washington. James was asked to take a position in FDR's cabinet as Customs Commissioner, which today is the Director of Homeland Security. James took his new job seriously to secure our country's ports and borders. He also helped start what became the Texas Rangers. Alice held down the fort while James traveled. James was then asked by FDR to be the acting Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. FDR explained to James that our Treasury was in debt because of overspending in preparation for World War II. FDR said that this would make us look weak in front of Hitler and our allies. James Henry Moyle, Mormon Democrat, was a book written by Gordon B. Hinckley that tells of Alice's great support, giving her husband the confidence to turn around the Treasury. James and Alice's son, James Douglas, our grandfather, we called him Daddy Jim, married Louise Covey, who later became a member here at the Town Club. Grandma Moyle, or Wisa, as we called her, was the most positive person I've ever known. My father, Jim, used to always say that nobody on earth ever had a negative feeling towards Louise Covey Moyle. Wisa always told us that if we ever had anything negative to say about anybody, not to say it at all. In the 1950s, as 3rd Ave continues east into Penrose Drive, it dead-ended at 1436 Penrose. And that's where my grandparents built their last home. My father, Jim, finished his mission in France and came home to that house at 1436. On the other side of my family, my grandfather, Nelson, also married well. Grandpa Nelson married Natilla Lewis, whose father fed the family by mining coal and died from black lung disease. As the oldest, my grandmother used to cook for the family at the entrance of that cave. Her youngest brother, who she essentially raised, became mayor of Provo. Grandma suffered from horrible migraines that the Mayo Clinic deemed one of the worst cases they'd ever seen. Grandma had to give herself shots that made her even sicker. After my uncle was born, Grandma had 7 or 8 miscarriages until my mother Janice was born. Grandma had terrible scoliosis and eventually shrunk to under 5 feet tall. We never, ever heard Grandma complain, even though she was in horrible pain. Grandma Nelson is the toughest person I've ever known. I come from a great family, regardless of their circumstances. We all come from great and tough people. I know Mrs. Smith's son, Enoch, and trust me, he's tough. Went to high school with him, he used to pound people on the football field. I was born to wonderful parents. I know that there are those in this room that knew my father, Jim, before he died, and that several of you still know my mother, Janice. Mom is funny, smart, and has an incredible group of friends that have always supported our family. Now, with all the incredible examples of strength that have gone before me and that surrounded me, why would I go astray? I liked school, most athletics, and had great mentors. I had the same swim coach from the age of 6 through East High School. My father put me on the swim team to give my dear mother a break from my hyperactivity. Our swim team won many championships because of our great coach and our great teammates. At that young age, I became an adrenaline junkie. I loved speed, especially when I could temporarily take flight. I was Evel Knievel on my bike, speeding down hills, hitting big ramps, jumping all the neighborhood garbage cans. One time I cleared the whole yard and landed in the bushes and almost hit the house. My parents and I lost track of how many times I was taken to the ER. My mother got in the habit of duct taping a large Kotex or a Pampers diaper to whatever injury I had to slow down the bleeding. The ER staff and my siblings always thought this was funny. I remember my brother Nelson calling me something like Kotex head on more than one occasion. My adrenaline addiction drove me to do stupid things. At 9, I jumped from the roof of my grandparents' home in Provo and hit the ground so hard I was stunned for some time and couldn't move. While skydiving at 15, this happened again when I had a chute that only opened up 90% of the way. It happened even more often while learning how to do inverted aerials on skis. I loved trampolines and pushed myself to get better at it, even though it didn't always come naturally. I loved being upside down in the air. I loved cliff diving at Lake Powell. I loved doing more twisting double backflips off the high dive than all the other kids. Eventually, I was able to do that on skis, disobeying a strict rule of my father's, who knew an aerial freestyle champion that had quit because his training partner had become paralyzed. One day, the school bully approached me, and out of fear, I really hurt him. I was invited to leave the public school system for a few years and had to go to private school. My parents were frustrated because they had taught me to turn the other cheek. I had my first knee surgery and was introduced to codeine. Everybody's physiology is different, but for me, opiates hit the same receptor site in the brain as adrenaline, so my love for them was instantaneous. I learned that if I mixed drugs, alcohol, and adrenaline together, this was the ultimate cocktail. I became sneaky and selfish in my addictive pursuits, and I did my best to always hide them. I was not allowed to have a motorcycle, so I used hard-earned money and bought one anyway, and kept it at a close friend Kenny DeVries' house. Eventually, I learned to ride up steep mountains without crashing and having to watch my motorcycle roll back down the hill. When I did make it to the top, coming back down was always the hard part. I found sport in antagonizing the University of Utah police, and a new addiction began. I loved getting in chases with them and was never caught, but they always knew it was me. My attorney was friendly with the police captain and said, "James, they have a picture of you over on their dartboard over at the precinct." I always took things too far. Once I sped through the Fort Douglas military base and 2 MPs took chase. Soon thereafter, the University of Utah police joined the chase, and then the Salt Lake City police. I got away again. Another addiction began, one of trying to outdo my own stupid capers. I was a bad example to my siblings, especially my little brothers. One of my brothers was tackled on our front lawn once because the officer thought he was tackling me. My father grabbed the officer and threw him off our property. And as many of you know, my dad didn't have a violent bone in his body. Sorry, Dad. I graduated from East High with good grades because it helped keep my parents off my back. Our graduation trip was to Mazatlan. I strapped a surfboard to close friend Steve Gillette's family station wagon, and we drove to the border where we hopped a train. Drunk from warm Mexican beer, I climbed on top of the train as it sped along. I started to run, jumping from train car to train car, and could hear my friends running from car to car beneath me, screaming at me to get down until I finally did. These were tough young men, and it was the first time I'd ever seen fear on their faces. At the U, I joined the Sigma Chi fraternity like my father and grandfather had. What an elite group of men. Then there was me. I was out of control. As things came easily for me, I became more entitled and thought the rules did not apply to me. I had a bishop named Craig Meacham We all called him Meech. I asked Meech if he'd help me prepare for a mission. We studied together weekly, and when I didn't show up, he would show up in my room at 6 o'clock in the morning, reminding me that this was my idea. Meech had the awesome combination of being very funny and non-judgmental, which made him easy to trust. Meech was always easygoing, except for when he'd take us to the hoop on the basketball floor. Meech's wonderful wife, Mary Ann, had to endure my craziness too. One evening I was getting chased by the cops up Arlington Drive and could see that police cars were coming up Military Way 2, almost cornering me. I sped up Meacham's driveway and drove onto their back lawn behind their house, hiding my car. I ran into Meacham's house with all the red and blue lights shining through the windows. Meach was seated with his family and said, "What's up, big guy? Cops after you again? I guess you're sleeping over." It was not fair that I was a bad example to his children. My behavior was not okay. Meech and my father came up with a plan to get me away so I could clean up. I was given the opportunity to go to college in France. One weekend, my father encouraged me to take a break from studying and ride my bike up to the beaches of Normandy. I'll never forget riding through that enormous cemetery. Those beautiful green rolling hills, manicured, and endless lines of white crosses and stars of David. I was hit with the realization that thousands of young men my age had died as America entered the war in Europe. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I thought of the ultimate sacrifice they all paid so we can enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy today. My father knew what he was doing when he sent me up there. Something deep inside me changed that day, and I'll forever be grateful for that experience. Thank you, Dad. I love you. It's a picture of my mission. After returning from France, I received a mission called Rio de Janeiro. I fell in love with the Brazilian people and their culture. I served diligently and successfully, but when I came home from my mission, I started to fill my life with adrenaline activities again. My new bishop had just bought Terrell Dugan's home, but despite his best efforts on my behalf, fighting and resisting arrest landed me in jail twice. I felt bad for my behavior, so I'd cover it up with more drugs, adrenaline, and alcohol. I went through rehabs to avoid felony convictions, later having the felony arrests expunged out of shame.
Sorry, Jim.
I love that. I became a basketball junkie and would play no rules, bloody street ball wherever I lived, getting my fix.
I'm so sorry, I don't know how to do this. I'm in a meeting, I can't talk. Please don't, talk to Mr. Dugan, please. Sorry, guys, it was the only way to handle it.
More surgeries resulted, and they gave me more opiates. I had a wonderful girlfriend from high school into the college years. She often patched me up and sometimes took out my stitches. I remember sitting on the floor of her parents' bedroom, having to apologize for the cops who had come to their house on Harvard Ave looking for me. My behavior was really starting to ruin my relationships. Today, that girlfriend that always doctored me up is Dr. Julie Guston, an accomplished pediatrician. Ironic that her first patient was her boyfriend that acted like a child. I bugged the owner of Western River Expeditions until he gave me a job. I couldn't believe they actually paid me to be a river guide. I would have done it for free. Rowing day trips out of Moyle turned into 5-day trips down Cataract Canyon, 14 miles of some of the most intense rapids in the world, manning a motorized 38-foot J-rig. Mother Nature is powerful, and in an accident that could have been much worse, I dislocated my kneecaps. After this surgery, I discovered that opiate painkillers had gotten much stronger and my addiction accelerated. I graduated from the U and got into big wall rock climbing. That's me in the middle right there. And after about 10 years of training, I got to where I could do this. As the mountains got taller, I moved from rock to ice. I climbed the highest peak in Europe with a Utah team that included my brother Matt. The following year, I started to train with the Utahns on Everest team. In June of 1992, we flew to Alaska. We were blown away by what a 20,000 plus foot mountain looks like from sea level. The Forest Service required each one of us to put up a bond of $15,000 in case a rescue team had to be flown in to perform a rescue or bring back a dead body. A bush pilot flew us up to the mountain and our 3-week expedition began. The record low temperature ever recorded there was at 18,700 feet at negative 118 degrees below zero with wind chill. That is cold enough to flash freeze a human. 11 climbers would die the month that we were there. Death was all around us. Our team fell apart when we made it up to the 14,000 foot camp. A Russian climber and I decided to make a summit bid together. The Russian was a much more technical ice climber than I was, so I felt good about climbing with Moyle. We made it up the fixed ropes and arrived at the high camp at 17,000 feet. There was an unoccupied tent from the Japanese team that had just died. We could see their blood trail going into the crevasse. I didn't know how this affected my climbing partner, Moyle. As we hit the summit ridge, the winds were fierce and the temperature plummeted. Moyle didn't get additional layers on fast enough. We needed to keep climbing to get warm or go down. It was decided that I would lead. Soon I could tell the Russian was in trouble as he became dead weight at the end of the rope. He said he needed to go back and get into that Japanese tent that they had left behind. I asked if he could go alone. He said he could. The more technical part behind us, we both felt I could solo to the top and come back to the tent and we could descend together. I was not long solo before a strong impression came over me to go back. I could see the summit ridge and I'd been training for it for 6 months. But I said a prayer and then I felt the presence of my great-grandfather James, whom I'd never met. He was communicating with me to go back. As I caught back up with the Russian, he was in major trouble, having dropped equipment and broken some of his other equipment. I knew at that point that I was no longer in charge. Something higher had definitely taken over. I was fully aware that I was receiving angelic help. Once in the tent, I put Moyle in the only sleeping bag between us, boiled ice into water that took forever at that altitude so we could stay hydrated through the night, and went down to the 14,000 foot camp alone. It's light 24 hours a day in June in Alaska. I'd been on my feet for the most extreme physical challenge of my life for 22 hours straight. It was like running back-to-back marathons, breathing through a straw. The last thing I remember is getting to the bottom of the fixed ropes, detaching my ascender that was secured to my harness in the rope, and yelling at my team inside their tents to come and get me. I don't remember being dragged into my tent. I passed out for 10 hours. The next day when Moyle made it down, he came over and gave me a chocolate bar and thanked me for saving his life. The truth is that something higher took over and saved both of our lives. 2 days later, I climbed solo to the summit. I was able to radio down to the Forest Service and have them patch me through to my parents' home so I could let them know I was coming home. Mom screamed to my family that it was me on the phone. I asked why she was so upset. Mom told me they had heard on KSL radio the night before that a Salt Lake climber had died on Mount McKinley in Alaska, and that they thought it was me that had died. Back in Salt Lake, the Tribune's article of the experience was titled, "Utah Rescues Climber on Mount McKinley." But it was sports editor Lee Benson from the Deseret News that got it right with the title, "Reaching Summit is More Than Just Climbing to the Top." Lee recognized I was convinced something higher had taken over. It would not be the last time that deity, in the presence of an ancestor, would save me. During the first semester of a master's degree in business at BYU, I married an incredible woman. She was beautiful inside and out, came from a wonderful family. She had just won a national championship in volleyball as a starter at BYU Hawaii. We built a beautiful home up in the Provo Hills, and she finished her degree at BYU. She had horses, and I had motorcycles, and we loved climbing up into the mountains where we lived. We were visiting graduate students at Harvard, and I went back first to set ourselves up for the semester. Alone in Cambridge, I got drunk for the first time in years. I became a small-time but successful real estate developer. I had a few surgeries and got more opiates. I rationalized that the doctor gave them to me so it would be okay. Biggest lie ever. We had 4 wonderful children, JJ, Emily, this beautiful creature, and Michael. I was a good husband, father, son, brother, and friend, but as my addictions accelerated, I lost strength in every one of those relationships. Sometimes I'd doctor shop. The drugs had gotten even stronger. I created a development team that bought an old grocery store by the BYU Stadium. I developed the concept of a BYU student village for 650 students that included retail, restaurants, and sporting amenities. I named it Alpine Village because, as some of you may remember, our family cabin up in Brighton said Alpine above the front door. I went through more rehabs than I would relapse. I was unable to properly manage myself or anything or anyone else. I was horribly depressed. Eventually, my wife had to ask me to leave. It was the right thing for her to do. I was so ashamed I fell onto the streets. I was a coward, and that's not the way I was raised. I spent full time numbing my shame. I quickly went to the needle with methamphetamine and heroin. It was the strongest thing I could find. I pushed the limit trying to get as high as possible without killing myself and overdosing. I was in and out of jail 13 more times. The light was almost blown out inside me, although I felt the presence of my father all the time. I was permanently kicked out of the road home, which has been torn down now because it was such a horrible place. It was pretty hard to get permanently kicked out of the road home. I became a petty thief to keep the needle full. I died on several occasions. They brought me back and revived me in the back of an ambulance in a hotel room and on the streets. I was a dead man walking. Like extreme mountaineering, many people on the streets were dying of exposure. Many more were dying of overdoses or worse. I stole a gun from a powerful authority that I won't mention and traded it for heroin. I was losing the last of the light that was once inside of me. One of my hustles was to fly a sign at the Home Depot with all the day workers there that said, "I speak Spanish and can manage workers." One day I was picked up and taken to a house in my old neighborhood. I was ashamed to learn that the man who had hired me was a member of Harold B. Lee's family. Yes, you guessed it, now living at 1436 Penrose, the house my grandparents had built. I became afraid of a permanent spiritual death, one where I couldn't be with them. I prayed and begged Heavenly Father to save me. I begged him for the right to be able to earn them back into my life. It was then that an incredible series of miracles started to happen. Shortly thereafter, out of nowhere, Meacham came walking up. I hadn't seen him in 35 years. I testify to you today that I know with every fiber of my being that that was not a coincidence. I said, "Meacham." Meach looked at me and said, "Who are you?" I'd lost 100 pounds, had a long beard, and was probably bloody. I told him my name. He grabbed me, and for that instant, I didn't feel shame. He asked if he could give me work. He went home and told his wife, Mary Ann, and she said, "Let's go back and get him." Mary Ann Meacham's decision to influence her husband that day to come back and get me was pivotal in saving my life. Thank you, Mary Ann. I love you. It was a miracle I was still there. is I was never in the same place for long. Sorry, big baby. They took me home and I tried to clean up. Meach put me up in a hotel, but soon the hotel kicked me out. Joseph Grenny was in Meach's ward and founder of the Other Side Academy, also known as TOSA. TOSA is a 2.5-year life skills therapeutic community for the chronically homeless, incarcerated, and addicted. Joseph's idea to start the Other Side Academy would still be a dream if not for the support of his incredible wife, Sheila Grenny. Like Marianne Meacham, I believe that Sheila Grenny also was pivotal in saving my life. Thank you, Sheila. I love you. She also told me to take me down to the bench at TOSA, which is a portal to a new life. As I sat on the bench, I looked at TOSA's 12 beliefs. They were the gospel of Jesus Christ, put simply. Everyone was happy, clean, hardworking, and connected. I didn't believe it was real. I was a coward, and I left and got high. I was hit by a car, mangled. I don't even remember it. I woke up in the ICU at the University Hospital with my mouth wired shut for the next 4 months, braces on both legs, and it took me a year in a clinic to become ambulatory again. The Meachams got me back to TOSA by visiting me often. They got others involved, including my children. My children got together and decided that they were going to keep learning from me, even if it was from my mistakes. My children also wanted me to go back to TOSA, like Meach. Meacham then told me he was going to meet Joseph Grenny at our old ward and that I was going too, whether I liked it or not, where they were wrapping Christmas presents for the students of the Other Side Academy. I met Joseph and heard incredible stories of TOSA students that had turned their lives around and even become staff members, like Tiffany Blair. Tiffany had grown up sometimes under a viaduct with a mother that was a prostitute, having to defend her mother, herself, and her siblings from the ravages of the streets. Tiffany had found success, got her son back, and was putting herself through college. It made me yearn to be with my children again and gave me the hope that that might be possible. Meach showed me where Joseph was rebuilding his home in our old neighborhood. When he drove me by the home, I couldn't believe it. Yes, you guessed it. The address was 1436 Penrose Drive. As a real estate developer, I knew what chain of title looked like on that property. James Douglas and Louise Covey Moyle, Harold B. Lee and his family, and Joseph and Sheila Grenny. Meach told me the Lord was parting the Red Sea for me, and I knew he was right, so I went back to the Other Side Academy. I don't often believe in coincidences anymore. One of Joseph's sayings is that the Lord weaves together his children for divine purposes. The Lord shows us his divinity by connecting us together. TOSA found a phenomenal man by the name of Dave DeRocher to become TOSA's executive director. TOSA works when absolutely nothing else works for people like me. The average number of jail and prison stays for TOSA students is in the mid-20s. I was on the low end at 15 times. TOSA runs social enterprises that fund saving the next person's life for free and takes no government funding or insurance subsidies because of its strict and solid belief in self-reliance. That is why politicians love the Other Side Academy. At the Other Side Academy, we don't have doctors, therapists, or clinicians. We are completely peer-driven. It's intense honesty and accountability, and we learn to enjoy very hard work. Dave took a cut in pay to take on the task of creating the Other Side Academy. With Joseph and Tim Stay's help, they bought the old Armstrong Mansion on the corner of South Temple and 7th East. As broken as I was physically, I was 100 times more broken spiritually. I was encouraged to work on my spirit on the inside. I had to learn to push through pain. As the drugs were flushed from my system, I had to deal with emotions that I hadn't dealt with in years. The biggest change came at 6 months when I stopped shaming myself and started praying again. This began to connect me to a loving Heavenly Father that had been there all along. I began to have faith that I could be with my children again. Tosa helped me recognize my true weaknesses and gave me the solutions to overcome them. By going through Tosa's intense process, my compass realigned. When I reached my 2-year commitment, however, I didn't feel strong enough to have freedom away from my intense connection to the Other Side Academy. I stayed another 3 months until I felt strong enough to reintegrate, staying involved in their intense peer-driven therapy and staying connected to the students and staff of the Other Side Academy. My cousin Jeff Scott appeared the same week I transitioned from being a student at the Other Side Academy. Jeff had been supporting Tosa for years and had been consoling my family and telling them that it was the right place for me and that they would save my life. Jeff's been a huge part of my support system ever since. My brother Matt helped open the door to my family. I asked him to give my children my new number. I hadn't had a phone in 7 years. Although cautious, my daughter Mary was first in the door. She had just received her associate's degree on a volleyball scholarship, like her mother. She was more beautiful than I could have imagined, inside and out. If you can't tell how incredible Mary is from where you were sitting, wait until you hear from her, and you'll understand what I mean. Mary Ann Moyle, I love you. Mary's younger brother Michael was close behind. Michael is on a mission in Madrid now. And fortunately, we had the opportunity to connect deeply before he left. We're even closer now. My daughter Emily is starting to trust me slowly and is carefully allowing me back into her life. We've become good ski buddies. She just graduated top of her class on an academic scholarship from SUU. My son James, or JJ, as we affectionately call him, is my Viking warrior. JJ is happy and successful. I've seen some pretty great skiers and heli skiing trips in Canada and Alaska and skiing off some of the mountains that I've climbed. But watching my son tackle double black diamonds this season and making it look easy was cathartic for me to see. All of my children perform at that level because of their great mother and our great families. I am so lucky to have my children back in my life again. All 4 of us had one of the best spring skiing days I've ever had. The best part of the day was listening to how well they all got along with each other and how truly funny they are with each other. As I listened, I thought of the prayer I had offered 4 years before, begging Heavenly Father to be able to be with them again. I said a silent prayer myself, grateful for the miracle. I also started going to the Church of Jesus Christ Addiction Recovery Program. When we get to step 12, we just start over again the next week at step 1. This is grounding me as I rework the steps. It is the atonement of Jesus Christ in action, scrubbing our souls clean. The Other Side Academy helped jumpstart this soul scrubbing process. I'm so grateful for the Other Side Academy for their continued hard work to help people as bad as I had become. There are graduates of the Other Side Academy that are my close friends today, that I climb with and ski with, and guys like Will Bell that are right here. Will is a graduate of the Other Side Academy and now is an employee for the Other Side Village, which is a 10-year, $90 million homeless village that the Other Side Academy and Mayor Mendenhall's just announced and that we just broke ground on. Will be awesome.
We had a speaker from the Other Side Academy last year that was very compelling.
Probably Dave. Yeah. Somebody said, James, why do you have a vanity plate? I said, I don't have a vanity plate. I have a gratitude plate.
Yeah. James, we have 15 more minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done with my part. I'm so grateful for my former wife, her family, and her husband that do so much for our children. I'm very lucky to have been saved by so many on this side and the other side of mortality. I'm so grateful for my ancestors that inspire me and watch out for me. I'm grateful for my mother, who never misses me in her prayers. I love you, Mom. As Joseph has sometimes felt those that have lived before him at 1436 Penrose, he recently told me, James, we were summoned to this place for you. Today I'm committed to always doing the next right thing so that I can stand in holy places. I'm grateful for a loving Heavenly Father that answers prayers. I'm grateful that by His Son, Jesus Christ, I can have the opportunity to become completely whole again so that I can be with my children and my grandchildren and beyond. I sat on the bench 3 times at the Other Side Academy. First time I was a coward and left, and it took me a year to get back there. The second time was over 3 years ago, and I got permission to sit on a 3rd time with my children. Mary, come up here with me, would you? The first thing that Mary showed me was the screenshot that had been on her phone the entire time that I was gone. Screensaver. This was it. It's also, obviously, my screensaver. It's on both of our phones. Recovery has given her back to me. Need I say more? And I say these things in the name of He who saves us all. Amen. We're happy to answer questions.
Yes. Here. James,
Yes.
I would like you to tell them, if you can really make it quick and short, about the day that you had to do when you first got there. It was sort of get up at 7 and what your routine was every single day. That was
Okay.
one thing that really impressed me.
Amazing organization.
So we're up. We have morning meeting. We eat breakfast. We have morning meeting. It starts at 7:15. By 8 o'clock, everybody goes to work, Monday through Saturday. And you work hard from day one. Period. That's just the way it is. And then we have different activities at the end of the night that we do to help keep us connected. Our peer-driven therapy and different. We have what's called the TOSA Talk every Wednesday night. It's like a TED Talk. And it's amazing the people that we have come to the Other Side Academy and participate and be part of it. The social enterprises that we run are the Other Side Movers, which are incredible because if you think about it, you know, the husband comes home and tells the wife, hey, we've got the Other Side Movers are coming to move our $30 million home in Park City. And then he explains to them who we are. And she says, no way, you're not coming in this house. And he says, no, they came highly recommended. And they end up using the Other Side Movers over and over and over. It's because of our system of accountability that we do 100% in all of our enterprises at the house, wherever we are.
Tell about that meeting where you confront each other.
So, Will, why don't you get up and tell us about games? Breakthrough group, is that okay? I'm gonna have him
So
participate
out there in the real world, you have a boss or someone's going to correct you, or you have difficulties with your kids or your family members, whatever that looks like. And so when you're getting feedback, I know myself, my whole life, it's always, I've turned everything into ash. I've either argued back or said some rude stuff to them. And so groups, Tuesdays and Fridays is a place for us to learn how to articulate our words. When I do something, someone has the opportunity to be able to bring me my behaviors, and we are able to talk about it. Sometimes I don't like hearing what they have to say to me. Sometimes I bite back, but over the course of time of 2.5 years, you learn how to sit there and listen to somebody and respectfully hear what they have to say, take it to your pillow, think about it, wake up the next day, and try to apply what they have told you. So that's the bread and butter there. If you were there to go to get anything, it's to learn how to articulate your words and sit in things. That way when you go back out there in society and something happens, you just learn how to say okay, and you don't end up in the back of a cop car or ruining a relationship. So.
Know about the wonderful stores and the tiny homes.
So we have 2 thrift boutiques, and like I said, we don't take any government funding or insurance subsidies, but the greater Salt Lake area has been very good to the Other Side Academy. As soon as people understand what our mission is and where their dollar is going, it goes to saving the next person's life for free.
And I can gather clothes I don't want and
Shop there.
stuff, and
Furniture.
they'll come pick it up.
Yeah, they'll come get furniture. Yeah, our thrift boutiques are like, you can't compare them to DI, nothing against DI, but they're super nice. You come in and there's people come in for clothes, but they'll outfit their whole house with an entertainment center and furnish their whole apartment. Yeah. Yeah, some are really great. I mean, people, they're headhunters that come there and shop and get good. They know what they're buying. They know what they're. And what do we usually get about 20? Will was a crew boss at the Thrift Boutique in Murray.
Oh.
And we get about 20% of value usually if it's something very valuable. We'll only ask for 20%. It used to make me mad. I ran clothing, which is about 400 grand for both stores. And I used to, oh yeah, that's the way to make money. And they're like, wait a minute, you're completely missing the mission, James. It's about the other students and about getting the public to come back. So
I'm told
let them
the
win.
antique
Will used to
dealers-
tell me all the time, let them win.
I'm told the antique dealers go there first.
Yes, they do.
There's really I mean, people give away stuff. It's amazing. Well, the whole organization is.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I'll end with this because I know we need to eat. But people ask me what, you know, with the life that you had and then with what you ended up going through, how did you get through it? And I thought of one scripture all the time, and it's in 1 Corinthians 10:13, and Paul said, who's one of my idols because he did one of the biggest 180s in history. He said, there hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able, but will with the temptation make way that you may be able to escape and bear it. And so I told myself all the time, that's a promise that I can overcome any challenge. And that's why I never completely gave up, and I just had all this strength around me all the times. And I had summits in my life. And there's a famous mountaineer by the name of Rene Dommel, and he was once asked the question, you cannot stay on the summit forever, you have to come down again, so why bother in the first place? And he looked at the reporter and shook his head. This guy was the Michael Jordan of mountaineering in Europe. And he said just this, what is above knows what is below, but what is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one sees, one descends, one no longer sees, but one has seen. Here's the cool part. He said there is an art of conducting oneself in the lower regions by the memory of what one saw higher up. When one can no longer see, one can at least still know. And that really helped me a lot because I had summits of, you know, coming from an incredible family and accomplishing some decent things, but those weren't important. What was important was seeing each one of these kids be born and having married having a great wife for it. You know, unfortunately she's had to move on, you know, but I'll have that again someday, you know. Those are the summits that I have to look forward to and the summits that I look back on, and that's what helped me in the lower regions. Kathy,
There.
cousin Kathy. Oh,
How
Yeah.
was it, how old are you first of all?
22.
22,
Yeah.
okay, so you were quite young when James,
I was like 14 when he and my mom got divorced and separated, and then
okay,
everything kind of went down after
went
that.
downhill from there.
Yeah.
How was it for you, and I know there were periods of time when you didn't know where he was,
Yeah.
or if he was okay.
I mean, it was scary for sure. I held a lot of it in for a long time. Like I would just be really quiet about it, and then I'd have one big outburst and lock myself in the bathroom and cry, and then I would come back and I'd be fine and tough. And I don't know. I think I was blessed with strength and really amazing friends and family around me. We kind of just bounced off each other's strength, I think, and it was just something where all we could do was pray, you know. We didn't have any contact, we didn't know anything, so we could only pray and have hope. And you know, sometimes that was hard because I feel like in life you just want control of things and you just want to make things happen, but when you have no way of doing it, you just have to hold on to hope. And I did that, and we saw him a couple times sporadically throughout the years. And then, you know, we saw him right before he went into the Other Side Academy, and he left me a voicemail, I think, and he was like, Meacham wants me to go to this rehab. I won't be able to talk to you for 2 years, and, you know, I don't know if our relationship could handle that right now. And I was like, I just laughed kind of in my head. I was like, are you kidding me? That's the only thing you
She
can
was
do.
like, see you later, you're
Yeah,
going.
I was like, that's the best thing you can do for a relationship, and that's, you know, I just had hope in that, and the whole time he was there, we felt really peaceful, and I wasn't worried.
Your brother helped a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't worried, and then
That's nice to hear.
I'm just super proud of him, and I mean, like he said, he told a little bit about our ancestry. I've always been told the stories my whole life, you know, of John Moyle and the Coveys and everyone before me, and it was always like, you know, I was a little kid, I was kind of like, oh, cool, old people stories. But I've always been proud to be a Moyle, even when it was super hard, you know, even in our life. I've always been proud, and now I'm extra proud of him and just so amazed with what, honestly, the Lord did with him, and I'm super proud of him, and I'm going to tell his story forever. So I'm excited to pass it on to my children and grandchildren, and I'm just really proud of him. So, yeah.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time and your honesty and your beautiful daughter and family.
Thank you.
And here's just a little gift.
Oh, that's for her.
But I think the thing that
That's
is.
not why she came.
Yeah, right.
She came to keep me accountable.
I'm sure you'll all agree that he has unbelievable courage and fortitude, and was surrounded by people that could help, and had a real belief in a higher power, which obviously helped. And I think we need to give him a huge round of applause. I don't know about you, but I think his next job should be in writing. That's
I agree.
amazing what you have
Speaking,
put together
you're really
and speaking. So thanks again.
You bet.